Hello, my soccer universe. My name is Roland and welcome to Football Talk. In this episode, we have to talk about all the midweek action in the Champions League, that will be the majority, the Europa League, and a little bit also the Conference League. Crazy Fiorentina score in there. But we also have to talk about the draw. And just so that you know, I'm actually shooting now this section where I'm talking about the games ahead of the draw, an early morning shoot, and the other one I will do then in the afternoon after the draw. Pack it all together. Nice episode to you. If you're watching this on video, you will see that I'm wearing an Atalanta jersey. Black and blue on me seems a little bit odd, but I'm actually wearing this with pride because Atalanta saved Serie A's honor. And yes, I think Juventus did that in a certain way as well. They preserved their honor too, even though they got in the end eliminated. You could also argue that in the end Galatasaray preserved their honor. But yeah. This for me is a major threat, preserving the honor, especially for the Italian clubs. I also want to throw in there Z, who preserve the honor of the Eredivisie, because Eredivisie teams are really not doing well in Europe this season too. And another weird thing is there were a couple of overtime games. Yes, we had one penalty shootout in Pilsen, also a crazy one, we'll mention it at least briefly. But very often when games went into overtime, then the team that actually suffered from being pegged back because they had an away win, they actually then scored quickly 2 goals and the honor was restored. So, honor restoring is the main thread here. I would be remiss to not mention in this preamble Bodø Glimt. It gave me a huge smile as a Milan fan, of course. But I also have to say, I talked about the downfall of Serie A in the episode last week. It also has to give you to think, as a fan of Serie A, Inter are far and away the best team in Serie A. And they are taken easily to the sword by Glimt. That is something that you should not necessarily all be smiles about. But then I said Jens Peter Hauge, former Milan player, being instrumental in really taking apart Inter. As a former Milan player, they let him go too easy. I honestly have to say I never liked that because I really thought there's something there and he did well in this half season overall. Yes, then he fell off a little bit. Maybe the environment is not quite for him because I think at Glimt he has a role and he's a technically adept player enough that if you have the right playing style, I think he can do something for you. But that he was instrumental in ousting Inter and then reveling in it as a former Milan player and even proclaiming, I'm Rossonero, you know. This is the best, moment of the week for me. Moment of the week for me. I cannot say this highly enough. What Glimt is doing, they are one of the best runs, if not the best run club in Europe at the moment. And then I think Atalanta is a second team that is really, really well run and is outperforming. Atalanta is not very traditionally Serie A, the way they do things. But Atalanta is probably pointing the way for Serie A forward. This is the way you have to go about it with a limited budget. This is not the ecosystem that you're working in. Yes, they're bigger clubs, there's more pressure. Atalanta doesn't have as much pressure. But the pressure is building if you continue to do these results. Dortmund has to be... I still maintain Dortmund is the most frustrating team in Europe. It's a team that I just cannot get behind because they talk the big talk and they're always flattering to deceive. But when it counts, boom, Dortmund go away. The way they shoot themselves in the foot is just something else. But yeah, enough of me talking, setting everything up. I would say let's dig into the action. First things first, I'm doing this from memory and you see now the results here. I also put in, the chances of winning the Champions League and so on and so forth. We'll talk about those a little bit more once we are done with the draw. But all what you see here is all pre-draw. The scheduling for UEFA, I thought was horrible. I was looking forward to having a nice Tuesday evening with 2 games that I thought were kind of imbalanced or where a favorite was a little bit in danger. That was, of course, Inter having to make a comeback against Glimt at home, where many said, oh, this is possible because this is Inter. And then, of course, Atleti against Club Brugge only managed a 3-3 draw. Unfortunately, UEFA did not do this for me. They put the Atletico Madrid game in the early slot, which meant I couldn't see much of it. Alexander Sørloth took Club Brugge apart. I mean, in the first half, Club Brugge managed an equalizer. They were actually well in the game. But then in the second half, Atleti were just better and moved on with a huge effort. The other two games on Tuesday evening, not much we can talk about. I mean, Leverkusen, Olympiacos ended 0-0 draw. Leverkusen move on. And Newcastle toyed a little bit, 3-2 against Karabakh. Karabakh scored 2 goals, but in the end, it was an easy moving on. It was all about Inter against Glimt. And it was easy to focus on that one as well. From the get-go, Inter though tried, but there was a nervous energy about them. And it is so funny because I heard even some thoughts of Glimt fans afterwards that after 10 minutes you already had the feeling that Inter will not score here. They are way too frantic the way they approach this one. They did not approach this calm and collected and, we are better. No, we need to push. And this is where you open yourself up. It was 0-0 at the half, and yes, Inter had more of the game, but it was not convincing. And then in the second half, Akanji makes the horrible mistake, and then Hauge taps home a save from Sommer, and it's 1-0, and then an absolutely brilliant counter-attack by Bodo Glimt. And this is what I love about this team. This is not like what Iceland did in the Euros in 2016, where they were defensively sound, and then counter-attack. This is high-octane stuff. This is not a boring sight to watch. Glimt are absolutely spectacular to watch. And just watch this counter-attack. If you haven't seen it, go on YouTube. Try to see the highlights, with what precision they did it. And the pass by Hauge to the eventual scorer, which I don't have now at the moment, I don't remember, to make it 2-0. Absolute brilliant stuff. Yes, Inter pulled one back, seemed a little bit like a fluke of a goal. Without goal line technology, this is not going to be given. But it really seemed like whatever Inter might try, yes, I think they hit the woodwork again. And maybe this is one thing that you can always use as an excuse for Inter. They also hit the woodwork in Norway. But still, you cannot be that open, especially when you are a top side in Italy. And this is very much the other talking point here. That Inter was an absolute disappointment, and especially in the first leg, where they didn't approach this with the necessary, professionalism in a way. And, just go, the Italian football podcast, just look at how Nima Tavali reacts on that as an Inter fan. It is glorious stuff. It is absolutely glorious stuff, and I'll probably try to link it up here as well, because it tells you everything. I cannot do it better, and, I'm smiling. I'm a Milan fan. But then on the other side, I'm also a Serie A fan, and so I should not smile too much about it. I could smile, though, a whole lot about what the Italian teams did on Wednesday. And yes, as a Serie A fan, this will be a little bit more Serie A heavy. Atalanta already at halftime had leveled the score against Dortmund. It was actually quite an interesting game to watch. And again, it was in the early slot, which I really didn't like all that much. But at least I could see most of it. In the first half, Atalanta really came out and put pressure, but Benzebaini basically gives Atalanta the first goal. Scamacca has no idea how he got to that goal. And then he also deflects the shot by Zappacosta into the net that the goalie had covered. And yes, at that point, Dortmund also had their chances. I actually thought that, this might be one of those. If Dortmund score one goal, then it's calmed down, but Atalanta kept on going, and then Pasalic heads it in. That was maybe the one good goal where Benzebaini was also involved, but I wanna absolve him from that one. But Pasalic heads it in. It's 3-0 for Atalanta, and at that moment Atalanta moving through. And the crazy thing is that I couldn't really get. Atalanta played so timid in the first game, but maybe there it was that Dortmund scored earlier. Yes, Dortmund scored exactly the second goal when Atalanta were creating a few chances, but then there was nothing coming from it. Atalanta. This was a completely different energy now. Dortmund make the changes. Then Adeyemi comes on, scores a beautiful goal. The game is seemingly headed to overtime. And then Kobel, who had actually made some really good saves up until the point, misplaces a ball. It's a counter attack. The ball gets back. Atalanta cannot take really the shot, but there's a cross in. And it's again Benzebaini. He wants to salvage it. But it wasn't. Kristovic has his head down there. It hits the studs up there. That the referee didn't give it immediately, I thought was actually a little bit of a farce, because to me this was a clear penalty. He is hit in the head. And even though the Austrian commentator, yeah, he goes for the ball and he plays the ball. No, even if you would play the ball first, you cannot endanger an opponent like that. And then it is Samacic who skies the penalty, but it hits the net. I mean, I really thought at one moment that he puts it high, but what a beautifully converted penalty. I mean, picture perfect. Atalanta deservedly through. But I have to say, Dortmund have to look only at themselves here. Were they thinking too much against the match? Were they thinking too much about the match against Bayern on the weekend already? I really didn't get it. What I also didn't get is what Galatasaray produced. I mean, everything on Wednesday evening. Wednesday evening was for me the boring day. But everything on Wednesday evening did not make sense. How did Galatasaray approach the game against Juventus? First of all, they give away an absolutely stupid penalty at 1-0. Then they go a man up. Then Juventus go a man down because Lloyd Kelly falls on the calf of Barish. And yeah, I heard now explanations from referees. It makes sense. It's really hard to see this as a true red card. I think it was kind of harsh, but I understand where the referee is coming from. He needs to be aware. He goes for a challenge. He needs to be also aware of his opponent. This is also what did Benzebaini in when he knows, it's not unreasonable that Kristovic puts his head down. So he's sent off. That should settle the game. Absolutely not. Juventus scored twice. Have the chances to get a fourth. I mean, the Galatasaray defense was nowhere. It goes even to overtime. What an effort by Juventus. If they would have put in that effort in that second half in Istanbul, Juventus are going through. No doubt in my mind. They, again, one half and one stupid red card did it in. And yes, the Lloyd Kelly one, I think this is a little bit more excusable. But Juventus with a man less get the equalizer through McKennie. And did have the chance. I think hit even the woodwork. They could have settled this in regulation. The problem is that with a man less than going into overtime, it was always going to be a tough ask. And Zegrova has the big chance. I mean, he has an open net. He puts it wide. This is one of these what-if moments. What if Zegrova really scores that one? Will then Osimhen make the goal for 3-1 that more or less settles the tie and then gives it also to Barish, I think, to make it 3-2? That is what I don't know. But you knew that as soon as Osimhen made the goal, which he didn't really celebrate all that much. He was very complimentary of Juventus, I have to say. I think there are some links going on. Crazy stuff. He didn't celebrate that one, but at that moment you knew that the game is done. But great effort by Juventus. But again, like Dortmund, they have only themselves to blame. This second half in Istanbul was an absolute disaster. And a second half by Galatasaray was salvaged in overtime because they had the man more. There's no other reason for that. Man more is also the story between PSG and Monaco, because Monaco had the lead at halftime. They had leveled the score, and then they again go a man down. Yes, then PSG go up 2-1. Monaco still managed an equalizer. PSG anything but convincing, which is also what we have to say for Real Madrid. Benfica had the early lead, immediately equalized by, I think it was Tchouaméni. And yeah, they get the winner through Vinny. It was all about Vinny in this one. I mean, Mourinho was not in the stadium, blah, blah, blah. Overall, this tie was a letdown because of all the scandals happening before that. But yeah, I think the big stories of this playoff round are the games involving the Italian teams. And the story is not necessarily that all Serie A teams went out. The story is Glimt. And the story is, of course, the fight back of the Italian teams where Atalanta got rewarded. So we have at least one Italian team left in the draw. And of course, we'll talk about the draw in the second part of this episode. The Europa League evening was also quite exciting. It gave us 3 overtimes and one ended even a penalty shootout. The first overtime was Lille beating Red Star Belgrade 2-0 away from home after overtime, and this came on the heels of Red Star going to Lille and actually being the better team. So a little bit of a surprising result, and of course Olivier Giroud also was involved in there. Ferencváros turned around against Ludogorets. Ludogorets had a late penalty claim, but didn't come to anything. Pilsen Panathinaikos play out a draw. It goes into a penalty shootout with two really good goalies in Lafont and Florian Wiegeler from Austria, who is a huge goalie. And first penalties are both saved, Wiegeler actually getting down as well. Then it goes all nicely until the fourth penalty where Pilsen that's put over the bar. And then in the end, Panathinaikos go through, even though they had to play for a while with a man less. Celtic get the win against Stuttgart away from home, however, with the 4-1 cushion from the first leg. I think Stuttgart go through quite safely here. A little bit bad for Austria, this result, because it means the Scots make a little bit more points. Bologna had to worry a little bit. Brann did have some early chances. There were some tastes of Glimt in there as well. But in the end, Brann then shoot themselves in foot by going a man down. Bologna then win it. Celta get also another win against PAOK, so they move on. Then we have Genk against Zagreb and Forest against Fenerbahce. Those were the two most interesting games because Genk had a 3-1 away win at Zagreb. However, Toby Laval, former last goalie, did not have his best day. First gifts the first goal to Zagreb, then they make it 2-0. Genk pulls one back, but then he's again too far out of the goal, so he concedes another one. However, in overtime, Zagreb really hurt themselves the most when a player of theirs slaps a Genk player, and then it ends in a 3-3. So Genk, similar to Galatasaray, through because they scored 2 goals in overtime. And then Fenerbahce had a 2-0 lead at Forest. And yes, Forest is probably more worried about their Premier League survival because that means way more for them. But yeah, Forest then get the goal back and move on. I'm not sure how good it is for them because, Premier League survival is probably much more important than the Europa League, even though a trophy, we know what it did for Spurs. And I could very well see that Forest might go a little bit deeper there. But still, yeah, Fenerbahce gave them a scare and, honor restored there as well. Because Fenerbahce is actually not that bad in Turkey so far this season. And then the Conference League, which also gave us more excitement than probably necessary. Celje Drita 3-2, like in the first leg, Celje moving on. And watch out for Celje. This is a team that is also more dangerous than one would think. Fiorentina played a B squad with a 3-0 cushion from the first leg. And Mazurek by the 49th minute had it equalized. Yes, the second goal was a deflected shot. And yes, Fiorentina probably didn't take this too seriously because, relegation trouble for Fiorentina too. But that was embarrassing. This goes right back to you need to take these matches seriously if you want Italy to maybe have even a slight shot at getting a 5th spot in the Champions League, which Fiorentina honestly couldn't care about less. But Fiorentina hang on. It goes to overtime. Fagioli scores a beautiful goal after a bad clearance by a goalie, but it was a beautiful goal. And then Ken is involved in an own goal. Yes, very late on the hair. Another blooper gives Białystok the 4-2 win. But it's not enough. Fiorentina move on. Rijeka does so also against Omonia and Samsunspor with Rockers crowd. 4-0 over Skandia. AZ turned around against Noah, salvaging the honor. Again, honor salvaged against Noah for the Eredivisie, and Palace also get their 2 goals against Rimski Moscow. Not a really great game, but they move on. They're in the next round. Palace, if they weren't in such a turmoil at the moment, should be considered the favorites in this competition. Actually, I think this competition is wide open at this moment, but I would say Palace have to be considered there. But I actually have a feeling that this year in the Conference League we will get 2 very surprise finalists that have probably not won all that much. A little bit of upset. Sigma Olmütz beating Lausanne-Sport 2-1 away from home after 1-1 in the first leg. It's the Czechs that move on, and Lech Poznan also move on quite easily. So, the Conference League, I have to say, was probably more exciting than I expected it to be, especially with Fiorentina giving every Serie A fan a bit of a heart attack. The other ones were maybe not as much pulse raising. Well, the draws are in the books, and I have to say, when I look at the Champions League draw, I pretty much got what I wanted. Maybe one prediction of mine went wrong, which is that Liverpool are not taking on Atletico Madrid, which is one of those that I saw coming from far away. But then the other Madrid team, and I think as a Real Madrid fan, and probably even as a City fan, you would say, it was clear that you guys are going to play each other because this is the marquee matchup. Real Madrid against Manchester City. We have already in the round of 16 these times, and they call it already Derby d'Europa. Well, I guess in a little bit of a way this could be it. But let's go pairing by pairing before we put this together in the context of the three. And I'm going by the seeds. So we have Bayern play against Atalanta and Arsenal against Leverkusen. We avoided a German clash. I think this was good. I think Atalanta can give Bayern some trouble. I think also Leverkusen can give Arsenal some trouble. But I think those are two relatively even matchups where, of course, Bayern and Arsenal have to be considered the heavy favorites. Then, I already teased it a little bit. Spurs play against Atletico Madrid. And usually you would say Premier League side should be favored. I think this is Atletico Madrid that should be favored here. And my model says as much. And then Liverpool against Galatasaray. Chance for Liverpool to take revenge for their, I think it was the second match day defeat. We have a few replays from the league phase as well. So Liverpool against Galatasaray. Definitely an interesting one. Given what Galatasaray showed against Juventus, you have to favor Liverpool in that one. But then I said Liverpool have all been not that convincing. Then we get the rematch of the World Club Cup final between Chelsea and PSG and Barcelona against Newcastle. I like this a whole lot. First of all, no English duel. And second of all, I think Chelsea against PSG is something that I wanted to see. Two teams that are performing not that well, but now that there's the revenge on there, I think PSG probably will want to do something. Barcelona against Newcastle is also a tricky matchup that, screams a little bit Champions League from the 90s as well. And then I wanted Sporting against Bodø Glimt. I really wanted it. And I know that many will not say Bodo are the big favorites, and because they eliminated Inter. I can see that point, especially with the first leg at home. On the other side, Sporting really have now a lot of time to study this and prepare themselves for that. And yes, away from home, it will not be pretty. And, Portuguese teams going to Bodø, that was never a good thing. My model favors Sporting. Second leg at home, that might play into something. But, it is a matchup where one of these teams will be in the quarterfinal. And I love that we have a quarterfinal with an underdog. And it's crazy to say that Sporting are an underdog. But in this modern landscape, they definitely are. And then we get, of course, City against Real Madrid. City are the favorites here. Should be the favorites. Again, Guardiola against Real Madrid. So many storylines in there. They've met so many times already. And yeah, it's another rematch. Real Madrid only face opponents that they already know quite well. And even if we now pan out the tree for that draw, Real Madrid will most likely, should they move on, play against Bayern Munich. It's another massive matchup for them. So Real Madrid, if they should make it to the final, I personally don't think they will make it to the final, but it's again an even numbered year, and Real Madrid as of late have been winning every 2 years out of nowhere. It would not be unlike Real Madrid to do so. But they would have a pretty steep climb to get into this final. But Bayern against the winner of Real Madrid and Manchester City. And yes, I'm already discounting Atalanta in there. I just don't see Atalanta going that. And then the winner of that one will play against the winner of the replay of the World Club Cup final. Club World Cup final. And then against Galatasaray or Liverpool. We could have gotten Juve against Liverpool if Juve would have pulled the upset. That would also have been quite an interesting one. There's tons of history, not all of that pretty. I honestly think that looking at it, there is no perfect team in that quadrant. And if I look at it a little bit closer, I would even argue that Liverpool probably got a little bit boost out of that. And they could potentially get a revenge against PSG. But for that, PSG have to beat Chelsea first. And as far as I know, their record against Chelsea is not the greatest. Going on the other side of the draw, Arsenal against Leverkusen, and then they will play against the winner of Glimt against Sporting. Arsenal needs to get through this one. There's no doubt in my mind that they are the huge favorites. It's a really favorable draw for Arsenal, I gotta say. While on the bottom, I mean, we either could get Newcastle against Spurs or Barcelona Atleti or any combination of these. Barcelona against Atleti, to me, is the one that seems more likely. I think both of these should be favored. It will also tell us a whole lot about the relation between Premier League and La Liga, actually, because we have quite a few. In fact, we have 3 Spain against England matchups. That's pretty sizable, I gotta say. Barcelona, Newcastle, Atleti against Spurs, they will need to work that one. Should they meet? They just met in the semi-final of the Copa del Rey. That might be one of those quarterfinals. Get your popcorn ready, I think, because Atleti really took Barcelona to the sword. I think I like that draw. Yes, maybe the Real Madrid-Manchester City matchup puts 2 giants on one draw, but we get at least a smaller team into the quarterfinals, and other than that, it's relatively even. What I like best is we do not have any same country matchups. And that, for me, is always the most important. Well, the Europa League didn't do me that favor because we got one single country matchup that, is probably the one that I didn't want to have at all. But, one by one. Top seed Lyon play against Celta and Aston Villa play against Lille. I think that's about alright. I wouldn't want to have Lyon against Lille, to be honest. So I think I like the balance in there, and I think Celta is a dangerous team, but also Lille are a dangerous team for Villa. So I think good challenges for the 2 top seeds. Then Midtjylland play against Forest, so you would think Forest are the favorites, but in the league phase, Midtjylland already beat Forest, so I think Midtjylland will actually like the chances here. And Betis play against Panathinaikos in an all-green matchup, so I would, of course, favor Betis hugely in that one, but Panathinaikos is no pushover. Then we had the section with the 2 Portuguese. Braga play against Ferencváros, got probably the better draw, and Porto against Stuttgart is one of the highlights of this round. Yes, Porto are favorites, but that is quite a big matchup. And then Roma play against Bologna and Freiburg play against Genk. Roma-Bologna, that's probably one of the other matchups that one really has to look forward to. I actually think that the first 2, Porto against Stuttgart and Roma-Bologna, I mean, Roma-Bologna for me is Serie A fan. I think for a general audience, maybe not as much, but those are the matchups that I'm looking forward to. And if we look at the bracket again, left side and right side, let's go first on the left side. Celta, Lyon play against the winner of Genk against Freiburg. Freiburg is overlooked here. I think with some good play, Freiburg could actually make a run here, but of course you would favor Lyon as of late. But Lyon is also a team that I cannot really quite get my grip on. On the bottom, Ferencváros, Braga, Panathinaikos, Betis. Betis should come out of that. So Lyon-Betis semi-final, and you feel already this is Europa League. This is not the Europa League of old where we had some really big names in there. This is Europa League. I'm not saying anything against Lyon. I'm not saying anything against Betis. Those are 2 great clubs. But it doesn't feel as weighty as it used to, a couple of years ago before the reform. On the right side, this is the one, the upper quadrant I think is loaded. We have Lille. I mean, Lille not as good as Lyon, but Lille, Villa, Bologna and Roma. Yes, Villa, just by the pure fact they're a Premier League team, a very well-funded Premier League team, should make it through. But I think Villa could have some trouble, and if Roma do well, they could get out of there. I'm not 100% that Villa will actually make it past Lille, even though they're a huge favorite. But just want to have said that. But there are a lot of good teams in there. I think it might even be that the winner is coming out of that section of the draw. And then on the bottom, we have Stuttgart against Porto, against the winner of Forest against Midtjylland. And Porto, I think, will like that. But Stuttgart will like that too. And Stuttgart is another team, very much overlooked. So watch out for them. And lastly, quick look also at the Conference League draw. Fiorentina get another Polish opposition. They have to go to Rakov, and again they will be favored. But this will be a theme in this draw. relegation troubles for Fiorentina, and so they might not take this full. Strasbourg have no such trouble, play against Rijeka, so the other top seed doing quite well. Then we have AEK against Celje. Yes, AEK should be favourite, but Celje have been really, really good. I would not be surprised if Celje get through that. And then Sparta against AZ. Yeah, I knew that this could happen. Cannot tell you who I would favor here. Sparta gets the slight edge here because AZ, yeah, the way that the Dutch teams have been doing, maybe I wouldn't be surprised. Then we have Ukraine against Poland with Shakhtar against Lech Poznan. If that would still be played in Donetsk, I think this could be such a great matchup, but I think it's still because Lech Poznan always has tons of fans. And Rayo against Samsunspor, this is deceiving. Rayo is also playing against relegation. I said there's a theme running here, and Samsunspor are really relishing playing in this conference league if you look at the crowd. So while Rayo should be the favorites, Rayo an absolute mess. I would not be really surprised if Samsunspor make it through. Then there's only surprise from the playoff. Sigma always play against Mainz. Again, Mainz are in a relegation fight, although their form has been on an upturn, but still has to be considered. Mainz have to be the favorites in that one. And then Palace, do they have relegation worries? Maybe a teeny bit, but they get now the chance to get revenge on Larnaca, which I think Larnaca was in the first home game, beat them there. So while Palace should be the huge favorite, it's not that easy. Cypriot teams are also not doing that badly. And let's look now at the bracket. And yeah, this is where Fiorentina, should they make it? And it is so hard because I think these top teams will not take this competition for full. Maybe Palace would, maybe Mainz would, but maybe Strasbourg, not Mainz. Strasbourg and Palace potentially could take it a little bit fuller. But aside, Fiorentina, Rakov meet the winner of Palace against Larnaca. That for a quarterfinal seems loaded, especially when I look at the lower bracket. Lech Poznan, Shakhtar and AZ against Sparta. I actually have a feeling that Sparta will go through, and then we might get Lech Poznan against Sparta or something like that, or Shakhtar against Sparta. So we will have an Eastern European team, which I actually do like if they would go on. Of course, if AZ make it, yeah, on off the Eredivisie, we talked about that. On the other side, Strasbourg play against Rijeka. One should favor Strasbourg, but Rijeka have shown good stuff against Omonia, and then Mainz, so a French-German quarterfinal is possible. And Rayo, should they make it against Samsunspor, Spanish team would play against Celje or against AEK. It is really hard to say who will win there. I think there will be a surprise semifinalist. I am saying that whoever wins Strasbourg against Mainz is probably in the final. That's the inkling that I have. But then I also feel that whoever comes out on the left side, I don't think that Fiorentina or Palace will make it. I actually think it will be an Eastern European side that will be in the final. Just saying. In any case, this ends the big review of the matches and the draw. And since this posts late on a Friday, I really would like to hear your opinion. What do you think about especially the draw? Do you like the way it panned out? I mean, most will talk about the Champions League draw, but I think also the others are quite interesting. And what do you say to my gut feeling predictions for this one? Because we know, on paper, it should be a clean Premier League sweep. I just don't quite see it. Because the Premier League is also more important, so those teams might not take it as seriously. So that definitely will add some intrigue. In any case, if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a subscription. Give me a like, leave me a comment, all the good stuff. Tell somebody else that this podcast exists so we can grow my Soccer Universe football talk. I will come back to you next week with the second installment of my expose of how we could reform European football. I've been working on that one already, and I'm curious to hear your opinion on that one too. And for that reason, it's very certain that I will talk to you soon about more things in my Soccer Universe. Bye!